Morning all, God bless you. Beautiful day, the sun's out, it's getting quite warm. I'm just on my way up to a really good spot of mine. I call it Mud Fossil Ridge. And I just found this really big old abandoned quarry. So these are always interesting places. So you got all those huge rocks there. None of them are really interesting to me. I'm sure I'll find something in there. But all of this is sedimentary mudstone basically. Not the stuff I'm looking for. But I tell you what, look at all this stuff. Look at all that. Every single rock is just loaded with fossils. See that? Fish fins, fish scales, shells, seaweed. Can you see all the seaweed in there? All of that. There's like bits of fern. Just all these rocks are just completely made up of fossils. Have a look. All of it. And it's all fish and things like that. Reptiles maybe, no doubt. This one's interesting. It's a bit of quartz. A bit of salt and peppery quartz, and it has fossil imprints on it. So that just proves to me that that quartz was once soft. I've always thought that quartz is fat. So just look at this pile here. You know, there's probably a few hundred cubic meters of mudstone that's been broken up, but it's just full of fossils. So I'm saying there's probably millions, billions possibly of fossils. Individual fossils just in this lot here, right? All of it. Look at that. All fish, scales. So just think about that. Everywhere we go, there are fossils underneath us, yeah? Wherever we find mudstone and sedimentary rocks, which were laid down by the flood. Not all rocks, obviously, are, you know, stone titans and all that. But when you think about the evolution lie, that once upon a time, you know, there was a bit of pond scum that developed into a creature, you know, like a salamander type thing that walked onto land, and then that became this, that became that, then it went back into the ocean, it became a whale, then it became a cow, and it just goes on and on and on, right? And it's just the most ridiculous, bogus theory ever. And that's what they teach kids at school. They've been teaching kids this since the 60s, en masse, you know. So I guarantee you, if I was to put every single fossil and rock here under a microscope, dissect them all, I'm not going to find one in between species, am I? Am I going to find a half cow, half whale? Can you imagine having to live as an in-between species? It just doesn't work. Can you imagine how awkward and horrible? It's disgusting. It's barbaric to think that there's not a creating God who made everything perfectly as they are. And yes, I get it that the fallen angels made creations of their own, you know, with genetics and all that, and inbreeding and all that sort of stuff. So just think about that. You know, they've got no in-between fossils. You know, Nebraska man and Piltdown man was basically, one was a primate bone, so it was a monkey bone. The other was a pig's tooth that still in the museums today, they display it as a caveman looking thing. But you imagine being half a whale, half a cow. How does that work? For millions of years, I'll say. So it took millions of years for that cow to become a whale again. Then they said, oh, they went back into the ocean. I mean, it's just the most ridiculous hoax of all time, with one thing in mind, with one agenda: to take God out of the curriculum, to take God out of our lives, and to justify sin and a life of not repentance, right? It's just an absolute joke, right? And all they can produce is this thing called archaeopteryx, right? So you imagine in all this, of course a bird and a lizard could be smashed together, or it's just a feathery lizard, whatever. But it's not an in-between species that proves evolution, because there is no fossils in the fossil record of in-between creatures. Can you imagine being an in-between creature for millions of years? Not your life, but I mean, it just doesn't work that way. God created everything and he said it is good. And the fallen angels came and perverted God's creation and made it bad. And that's why he sent the flood, right? So here it is, right? That is all from being under the water. And then the other thing they say, because look at this, it's in your face, evidence of the flood of Noah, yeah? About 4,500 years ago, yeah? Now, all they can do is say that once upon a time, that the reason all this is here, right? So this is their explanation for why all this here is here. Look, a massive quarry, meters and meters and meters upon meters of mudstone, yeah? Their excuse for this is once upon a time, this was under a lake. So everywhere in the world is mudstone. There is fossils under our feet. Mount Everest. Mount Everest has rocks that look like this. Just straight up full of fossils, yeah? So, you know, their explanation is just so bogus and pathetic that, oh, once upon a time that was under a lake. Well, no, there was a global flood. The whole earth was flooded. That explains it all. It's very basic stuff. So they just, I don't know how people can just sit back and go, you know, evolution, it must be right. It's got to be rebellion, because if anyone can make an excuse in their heart as to not live a life of accountability to God and do the right thing, they'll just go with that. And they think they're going to be able to face up to God one day and say, oh, no, but at school I got taught evolution, so I just sin and sin and sin. And God will say, no, my word was written on the tablet of your heart. So anyway, it's quite a hot day now. Snakes will be out, so got to really watch out for what's around. But yeah, this isn't a spot I'm finding mud fossil titans and beasts. These are just sedimentary mud fossils from Noah's Ark, basically, Noah's flood. So there it all is, you know, it's all parts of the ocean from the flood. The whole world was under water for a year. Yet they say once upon a time this is a lake. A lake? So once upon a time Mount Everest, the rocks on the summit of Mount Everest were under a lake. No, it was called a global flood, you know. Sometimes people just need to ask themselves, what do they actually believe in? Sometimes the most logical and simple equation is the answer, that we're all created. And, you know, here's a simple one I'm going to throw out there. If monkeys became men over millions of years, why aren't monkeys still becoming men? Yeah? Anyway, just think about that. Just think about what you believe in and, you know, question your logic, really, because all the evidence is here. But I guarantee in all this pile of fossils, I'm not going to find a half cow, half monkey, half whale, all of that nonsense. Like, really? All they can do to try and prove their point is produce fake things. Or, who cares? A feathery lizard. Of course some dinosaurs and dragons were feathered, you know, the plumed serpent, all of that. But anyway, God bless you all. Can't wait to get up to Fossil Ridge.